The afternoon heat shimmered across the private runway, the air thick with tension and jet fuel. A sleek silver Gulfstream sat lifeless in the center of the tarmac, its right engine coughing weakly before sputtering out. Crew members scrambled in confusion, their voices sharp over the roar of other departing planes. From the chaos emerged a solitary figure, Marcus Reed, his jumpsuit faded and stained with grease. He carried a battered red toolbox and the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent his whole life fixing what others gave up on. The contrast between him and the pristine jet was almost comical, a billionaire's world colliding with a man who worked for every dollar he'd ever earned. Standing nearby was Alexandra Kane, billionaire entrepreneur, aviator, and perfectionist. Dressed in a tailored white suit and heels that had never seen dirt, she regarded him through dark sunglasses, her expression cool, unreadable. "You're the mechanic they sent?" she asked, her tone caught somewhere between disbelief and curiosity. Marcus met her gaze evenly. "Yes, ma'am. I heard you've got an engine that doesn't wanna fly." A smirk flickered across her lips. "If you can get it running in 15 minutes, I'll double your fee." He smiled faintly, setting down his toolbox. "I'm not here for the money, ma'am. I'm here to make it fly." For a brief moment, their eyes locked, two completely different worlds standing still beneath the blazing sun. Then Marcus knelt by the engine, his hands moving with quiet purpose, as the timer on Alexandra's watch began to tick. The smell of fuel and burning metal filled the air as Marcus slid under the gleaming belly of the jet. Heat radiated from the tarmac, stinging his skin, but his focus didn't waver. Every sound, the faint hum of wires, the hiss of pressure valves, spoke to him like words in a language he'd mastered through sweat and years of struggle. Alexandra stood a few steps away, her arms crossed, watching him work. Her pilot whispered something about the problem being too complex, that the jet's computer system alone would take hours to recalibrate. But Marcus wasn't listening. He trusted his hands, not computers. He found the damaged relay, a tiny burned-out piece of metal that had crippled the $10 million jet. Sparks flashed as he stripped a wire and replaced it with a spare he'd salvaged from an old plane weeks ago. His hands moved fast, confident, unshaken. "Try the ignition," he called out. The pilot hesitated, glancing at Alexandra. She gave a small nod. A second later, the engine coughed, then roared to life, smooth and steady, like a heartbeat returning after near death. The roar silenced the crew. Even the wind seemed to pause. Alexandra slowly lowered her sunglasses, eyes widening just slightly as she stared at the man covered in oil and sweat, standing like a quiet storm beneath her jet. He wiped his hands on a rag, gave a small grin, and said, 15 minutes. "Guess I overdelivered." Marcus straightened up slowly, the roar of the revived engine echoing behind him like a personal victory. Sweat glistened on his skin, streaked with oil, but his calm demeanor never broke. He closed his toolbox, every motion deliberate, controlled, the kind of confidence that came not from arrogance, but from years of surviving on skill alone. Alexandra approached him, her heels clicking against the concrete, the wind from the engine tugging gently at her hair. For the first time since he arrived, her expression softened. "Just a shorted relay?" she asked, half incredulous, half admiring. Marcus nodded, his tone humble. "That's all it was. Machines break when people ignore the small things." She tilted her head slightly. "You talk like someone who's seen more than just engines." He gave a faint, almost weary smile. "When you grow up fixing things no one thinks are worth saving, you learn to see what's really broken." Her gaze lingered on him, the steadiness in his eyes, the quiet strength beneath the grime. Around them, the ground crew was already dispersing, murmuring about how he'd done the impossible. But for Alexandra, the moment had shifted into something more personal. "You saved me a fortune," she said finally. "And maybe a bit of pride." Marcus shrugged lightly. "I didn't do it for pride. I just don't like seeing something that can fly grounded." For the first time in years, Alexandra found herself without a ready comeback. Something about his words hit deeper than she expected, a truth she couldn't hide behind money or status. She studied him in silence, realizing that maybe this man hadn't just fixed a jet, he'd just disrupted her entire view of worth. The sun had begun to sink behind the hangars, staining the sky in hues of gold and rose. The jet's polished surface gleamed in the fading light, and the noise of the runway had quieted to a distant hum. Marcus sat on a fuel crate, sipping water from a dented bottle, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He looked tired, but content. Alexandra found herself still there, long after the jet was ready for takeoff. She'd dismissed the crew hours ago. The sky over the runway had turned a deep orange, streaked with violet as the day melted into dusk. The roar of distant engines faded, replaced by the low hum of cicadas and the whisper of wind across the tarmac. Marcus sat on an overturned toolbox near the hangar, his jumpsuit streaked with grease and his expression distant, thoughtful. Alexandra hadn't left yet. Her jet was ready to fly, her schedule already hours behind, yet something kept her there. She leaned against the wing, arms crossed, her usual confidence softened by curiosity. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about profits, deadlines, or shareholders, just about the man who'd brought a dead engine back to life. "You could be working for any aerospace company," she said quietly. "With skills like yours, you'd have a team, a lab, maybe your name on the planes themselves." Marcus smiled faintly, watching the last traces of sunlight fade. "Maybe. But then I'd lose what I love most, getting my hands dirty. Machines talk to you only when you listen close. Out there, it's all numbers and titles. Down here, it's real." Alexandra studied him, the roughness in his voice, the ease in his honesty. There was something magnetic about it, something she hadn't felt in years. "You're different, Marcus," she admitted. "Everyone I meet wants something. Money, influence, a favor. You just fix things." He looked up at her, his eyes calm and steady. "That's because I know what it's like to be broken," he said simply. "When you've been there, you don't chase power, you build purpose." For a moment, she couldn't speak. The woman who owned fleets of jets and commanded boardrooms felt disarmed by a man who owned nothing but his skill and integrity. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was electric, alive. As the first stars appeared overhead, Alexandra smiled, a small, genuine one that surprised even her. "Maybe," she said softly, "you just fixed more than an engine today." Marcus looked at her, eyes reflecting the warm glow of the runway lights. "Maybe," he said, "but I wasn't the only one doing the fixing." And in that fading light, something invisible but undeniable began to take shape, a connection neither of them had planned for, but both suddenly couldn't ignore. The night settled over the runway, wrapping everything in a soft, electric stillness. The jet's engines purred quietly now, a steady heartbeat in the dark, waiting to take off. Crew members stood at a respectful distance, sensing something different in the air, not just the hum of machinery, but the weight of an unspoken moment. Marcus tightened the last bolt near the access panel and wiped his hands on a rag. His job was done. He turned toward Alexandra, ready to say goodbye, but stopped. She was standing by the jet's stairs, the lights painting her in gold and silver, her expression unreadable. "You're really leaving?" he asked. "I was," she said softly, taking a step forward. "Until I realized something." He tilted his head. "What's that?" She smiled faintly. "You didn't just fix a machine today, Marcus. You reminded me what real strength looks like. I've met engineers, investors, pilots, but none of them had what you have." He gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "Just a good set of hands and a stubborn streak." She shook her head, her voice firm but tender. "No, you've got heart, the kind that can't be taught or bought." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the world around them fading away. Then, to everyone's shock, Alexandra reached into her pocket and pulled out a platinum ring, simple, elegant, shining beneath the floodlights. She took a small step closer. "Marcus Reed," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you fixed my jet, and somehow, you fixed me too. So tell me, will you stay by my side and help me fix life itself?" Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Marcus blinked, utterly stunned, his calloused hands still holding that oily rag. He let out a low laugh, half disbelief, half wonder. "Ma'am," he said softly, eyes locking with hers, "I fix what's broken. But you just made me whole." Alexandra smiled through the tears she hadn't expected, and in that instant, two worlds, one of oil and sweat, the other of wealth and sky, finally met in perfect balance. The jet engines thundered again, this time not as a machine reborn, but as a witness to something greater, a love story born from metal, fire, and fate.